Hi, I'm Eugene McKenna. I'm the Vice President of Hydrogen and Sustainable Technologies at Johnson Matthey. So Johnson Matthey is a long-established 200-year-old company with its roots in platinum group metal chemistry. Today, it's a sustainable technologies company that uses its deep science and technology to work with its customers to solve problems for them and to make the world a better place. And very relevant to the chemical, petrochemical topics that we've got in this conference today. There's a lot of sustainability conferences about, which are very good, and hydrogen conferences that are about. I like this conference because it really brings the petrochemical community together, and they are people who are going to have to implement many of the solutions that are being talked about elsewhere. I spoke and hosted a panel on a session that was looking at defossilisation of the petrochemical industry. My presentation focused on the role of hydrogen in providing renewable carbon for the petrochemical industry, looking forward to 2050, where we will need twice as much embedded carbon as we have today, and none of it must come from fossil fuels. And so a huge amount of hydrogen will be required in order to provide that renewable carbon. Well, I thought that people were very engaged, and I had the first session, the kind of keynote session of the kick-off the conference. So people need to warm up, but they warmed up very quickly and quickly got into an interesting debate. I thought the panelists had forgotten there was an audience there. They were so engaged in the debate, which is always a good sign. In particular, these are the people who actually have to implement the solutions in order to decarbonise the assets that they're running. So it's really the right group of panelists to be talking about the issue, not theoretically. I heard an excellent presentation from Essar, who are implementing a blue hydrogen technology in the northwest of England on their refinery site. And they'll use that hydrogen to completely decarbonise the heat in their refinery processes, and they'll go on to use it more extensively elsewhere, bringing in ammonia too. And it was a fantastic example of a technology that people have talked about theoretically, but this group of people are actually implementing it, and they're linking decarbonising, they're taking the first step in decarbonising the refinery to supplying hydrogen to a bunch of other industries in an integrated network around the refinery. So I think that the main challenge of the petrochemical industry is both to reduce the emissions that from heating their reaction vessels in order to produce their petrochemicals, but also to replace the carbon in the petrochemicals they're producing. So things divide into two areas. It's providing the hydrogen in order to, from renewable sources, to replace methane as a source of that energy, but also the technologies that will provide the carbon. So it's the technologies for recycling plastics, for biomass, being able to bring biomass into refineries, for being able to bring carbon dioxide into refineries in the right oxidation level to replace fossil fuels. So this was something that was very different about this conference, and because I'm very familiar with there being apps at conference where you have to arrange your meetings yourself with people you're interested in talking to. Not everyone is gregarious, and whenever you get tired in a conference you can back off a little bit, but this was really different. We had a personal manager who facilitated was active as a matchmaker. I didn't know if it would work, but actually all of the meetings that I was brought to actively by my personnel manager turned out to be really relevant. Some of them I wouldn't have predicted, but they were, interesting things were brought to my attention I wouldn't have picked from people to talk to. So I thought that was different, something worked really well. So there's a few things. First of all, Johnson Matthey has a variety of technologies which we think are big levers that will help the petrochemicals industry to defossilise. So I think it's important that people know this, because here people are wrestling with that issue of how to defossilise, and we have many of the solutions. But it's also important to get feedback from this community who are going to have to implement these solutions to make sure that you're not living in a bubble, that people who are actually on the ground doing this, you hear their challenges, because you can hear the challenges that they have to deliver business as usual in this fossil world that we have today, along with the journey to defossilization of everything that they're doing. So it keeps it real.